Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, participants. Servant leadership, a review and synthesis. Leadership is an important social influence process and one of the most comprehensively researched behavioral science. The massive research on the area has motivated some leading scholars to investigate the bond between leadership and ethics. A leadership theory, Burgoon, new research area known as servant leadership, which deals with virtues, ethics, and morality. Servant leadership stresses the need for leaders to want to serve others. It recognizes the role of organizations globally as creating people passionate about creating a better tomorrow. Practitioners and scholars agree to the same. The concept of servant leadership dates back to 1970, thanks to Robert Greenleaf. Despite his hard work in coining the theory, it remains understudied but has been applied intensively in most organizations. In this review, a lot of research was done to provide information about servant leadership, including ascertaining the current state of servant leadership, advanced methodologies of research in management research, and synthesis of divergent studies. The study's main aim is to thoroughly examine the existing body of research while organizing it to understand servant leadership more broadly. The review focuses specifically on studies about servant leadership, excluding studies on test and measurement tools. The selection therefore includes identifying all relevant research studies available on the Internet and choosing those with the major focus to use servant leadership in the organizational setting. In the screening, the articles were required to have servant leadership as the main topic, be in empirical study, be in English, and examine servant leadership theory. The initial search gave around 500 articles, which were reduced to the 31 after primary screening. The secondary screen eliminated 9 more, leaving 22 peer-reviewed articles appropriate for the review. The matrix method was used in arranging and abstracting information from the 22 articles. Servant leadership is likely to be somewhat contextually dependent, as suggested by Greenleaf when he describes his concept applied to 4 separate organizational types: business, education, foundations, and churches. The importance of context is further emphasized when Greenleaf describes institutions as servant leaders. Servant leadership theory may be fully, partially, or not at all applicable in a given context. But by blending Russell and Stone's two-dimensional functional and accompanying attributes model, the Senjava and Saros concept of being and doing along, the Van Peterson's compassionate love and servant leadership conceptual model, it may be possible to cluster relatively stable core servant leadership attributes with attendant behaviors, which are valid across several cultures and contexts. Based on logical analysis, the servant leadership model's 3 dimensions comprising the servant leadership orientation, emotional intelligence, and leadership competence has been recognized. Each dimension is defined by traits known as attributes, which are demonstrated through servant leadership behaviors which impact followers as individuals and teams, organizations, and communities. All of these interactions take place within the organization's cultural contexts. The interrelationship between servant leadership orientation, emotional intelligence, and leadership competence depict the intersection of leadership, competence, servant leadership orientation, and emotional intelligence. When they are properly intersected, highly effective servant leadership occurs. A servant leader is highly servant-oriented, and leader demonstrates a desire and commitment to serve, shows concerns for others, lives morally, is human, seeks personal growth opportunities, possesses a positive spiritual faith or life philosophy, which is greater than oneself, and respects diversity. A servant leader is highly emotionally intelligent and demonstrates personal competence, self-awareness, and self-management, and social competence, social awareness, and relationship management. A servant leader competently applies contextual relationship and management expertise, which includes being culturally competent, possessing foresight, being knowledgeable, empowering colleagues and others, building organization and people, and practicing responsible stewardship. From the Servant Leadership Review, it is undeniable that servant leadership theory proves applicability in organizational settings, cultures, and contexts. Greenleaf established a philosophy of servant leadership. Servant leadership is valuable and viable on an organization and level of individual interactions. Servant leadership attributes stipulate several duties expected of a servant leader explained by various scholars in different environmental contexts. There is a strong relationship between servant leadership and workplace ethics. Ethical concerns and issues of servant leader in organizations and institutions require a genuine and moral obligation to serve. Servant leadership theory is viable in promoting leadership framework and ethical standing lacking in the current organizational and cultural settings.